presented as disrespecting the flag. He has gone to every length possible to explain, if I were disrespecting it, I wouldn't be doing it this way. I'm kneeling with respect, but I'm doing it to draw attention to what is happening, which is to say, brothers are being killed, for God's sake.
Lots of your responses coming in, and thank you for that. One here that says, Michelle did a te reo course on her own online. What an oxymoron. How would a student know they were effective if they weren't talking with other student learners?
Well, you do. You engage with lots of other people. There's chat rooms and there's full engagement with tutors and other students, and you see everyone else's work. So it's very communicative. Yeah.
Very cool. Now,
otherwise you don't learn.
Right. Chaos in the White House, another book, but this time written by someone with a fair bit of journalistic integrity, Bob Woodward, of course, who broke the Watergate scandal, which ultimately led to Nixon's downfall. It's a bad look and comes on the heels of others commentating on the turmoil in the administration. Here are a few of the most dramatic quotes from the book. Woodward quotes White House Chief of Staff John Kelly as saying about Trump,
"He's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town. I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had."
And Woodward says Trump's former staff secretary, Rob Porter, would remove documents from the president's desk to keep Mr. Trump from signing them in a bid to avoid the consequences, Mr. Trump's more dangerous impulses.
It felt like we were walking along the edge of the cliff perpetually. Other times we would fall over the edge and an action would be taken. This was no longer a presidency. This is no longer a White House. This is a man being who he is.
And former top economic advisor Gary Cohn apparently called the president a professional liar. So, to you both...
I was wishing the next words were, and he joins us now. Big fan of Bob Woodward.
Yeah, totally. But look, the Trump supporters will just say, not without cause, that Woodward is the Washington establishment just having a go at their man.
Yeah, but you know what I really loved about this story? I thought it was so great just knowing what politics is like, that the way they cope with some issues was to take the document off the table so he couldn't do anything with it, right? I mean, that is just pure political management. Oh, we'll put you on something else at the moment. What about looking at this, Mr. President? Because you can just see it. He's got the attention span of a gnat. That's why he does Twitter, right?
You're suddenly thinking, could I have another word than that, aren't you?
Yes, I saw
so you just, look, don't worry about that document. Have a look at this one, and they sort of save the major crisis by taking it away until he starts to remember that actually he never signed that thing. Right?
It is just so Veep, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Entirely.
What do you think, in a minute, where will this lead? Where do you think this will head? In terms of a Trump US?
I just hope for a midterms huge correction, but I don't know. It's so gerrymandered that who the hell knows what the outcome will be.
He could still crash and burn. He could still crash and burn, yeah.
It's just another bad book that says Trump. The book will all but be forgotten.
and I've read plenty. He lies.
Just another bad book. Surely the book will all be forgotten. The next Trump scandal is sure to hit headlines next week. Surely, Michelle.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
Yeah, very good.
Good copy.
I'll be buying it.
You have both been an absolute blast. Not easy, but a blast.
You're fun too, Wallace.
David Slick and Michelle Bogue. Wonderful. We'll see you again. I'm Wallace Chapman in for Jim Mora all this week.
Tō mara e hoa mā he kōrero kei te haere he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Welcome to Checkpoint tonight. More charges laid and those charged banned from race courses around the country. The latest on the allegations of race fixing. The PM flies to Nauru, the Australian PM does not. What has the Pacific Islands Forum achieved? In Christchurch, a city councillor faces disciplinary action after claiming council staff deliberately altered the city's district plan. In a year of climate extremes, Japan has a typhoon thrown into the mix. Also tonight, the very high cost of living in Wanaka. Bob Woodward's book on Donald Trump's White House forces John Kelly to say he did not call the president an idiot. Donald Trump tweets it out. And angry Americans burn their Nikes. You can't make it up, but it's all true. And it's coming up on Checkpoint.
RNZ News at 5. Maloelele, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in Aho. A private investigator who helped a Taranaki woman overturn her conviction for manslaughter says it has parallels with the Taina Pora case. In 1989, Terry Friesen's baby daughter died after being severely shaken. Ms. Friesen was sentenced to 6 months supervision after pleading guilty to manslaughter. 13 years later, her ex-partner, Brownie Broughton, confessed he was responsible for the baby's death and was jailed for 3 years. However, her conviction remained on the books until it was quashed this afternoon by the Court of Appeal. Tim McKinnell, a former police detective turned private investigator who also worked on the Taina Pora case, says once again flaws have been revealed in the criminal justice system.
This is another false confession case. Taina's one that we know about. There are others as well that have floated about. So it's a concern that these cases take so long to be dealt with and addressed. Terry's had to wait almost 30 years for this to be dealt with, and that's just not good enough.
Tim McKinnell says it highlights the need for a criminal cases review commission. The Prime Minister says it's unlikely she'll meet with refugees while in Nauru for the Pacific Islands Forum. Jacinda Ardern has emerged from the all-day leaders retreat to speak with journalists and unveil a plaque at the University of the South Pacific. She says logically it doesn't look likely that she'll meet with any refugees today, although she may run into them in the community. Ms Ardern says a formal meeting is unlikely.
Having said that, I am keen to hear about their experiences. That's something, though, that would need to be facilitated by the Nauru government. It's not something that I've firmly set yet, but I hope to be able to come away from my time here with a bit more of an understanding of those experiences.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. 3 more people have been arrested as part of an investigation into race fixing. The men aged 30, 42 and 49 were due to appear in Christchurch District Court this afternoon on multiple drug-related charges. One is also facing a charge of unlawful possession of a restricted weapon. The police say 10 people have now been charged over Operation Inca, the national organised crime group investigation into corruption in harness racing. They say today's arrests were the result of a further 6 search warrants conducted in Christchurch this morning, taking the total number of search warrants to 17. Napier residents are being asked not to take baths or flush toilets for the next 36 hours as torrential rain has overloaded the city's wastewater system. The rain has caused flooding on many roads and closed 2 schools early in the region. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Anisha Bradley reports.
In a Facebook post, Napier City Council says the sewage network has been overloaded over the past 24 hours and urges residents to keep their household wastewater to a minimum. It says showers should be short and the washing and dishes left for another day so it can get the wastewater system back on track. Hawke's Bay Civil Defence continues to monitor river levels as the deluge is forecast to continue until tomorrow afternoon. While some have risen rapidly, it says all are still within normal alert levels and there's no cause for concern. Ko Anusha Bradley Aho.
A 20-year-old woman has been sentenced to 6 years and 7 months in prison over the kidnapping of 2 women in Auckland earlier this year. Lenora Mahanga and 3 teenagers were charged over the May kidnapping in an ordeal that lasted 3 hours for the women who had confronted the group trying to steal their car in Auckland's CBD. They were assaulted, and when the car wouldn't start, they were forced to walk around town with the group while they looked for another car to steal. The 2 women were then bundled into the boot of a stolen car and driven to South Auckland, where the car crashed down a 5-metre bank. The Auckland District Court Judge Brooke Gibson told Mahanga she was a mini crime wave even before the events of that day. 10 people have been killed by Typhoon Jebi, the worst storm to hit Japan in 25 years. Jebi has left a trail of destruction across the west of the country, hitting major cities like Osaka, Kobe and Kyoto. The ABC's Jake Sturmer reports.
Hundreds of flights have been cancelled, train services have been disrupted and power has been cut to more than 1.5 million homes. One man was killed when a storage facility collapsed amid strong winds in Shiga Prefecture. Another man died after falling from the 2nd floor of his home in Osaka Prefecture. One of Japan's critical airports, Kansai International in Osaka, remains closed after flooding and damage to a bridge that connects it with the mainland.
Jake Sturmer in Tokyo. It's 5 minutes past 5. To sport, next month's Tonga-Australia test in Auckland poses no threat to traditional Trans-Tasman rivalry, the New Zealand Rugby League chief Greg Peters believes. The NZRL was initially reluctant to stage the match, fearing it could affect ticket sales to the Kiwis-Kangaroos clash a week earlier. Peters, however, is confident attendance at the Trans-Tasman match won't be affected.
We'll be doing our level best to sell that out. A Trans-Tasman rivalry is at the top of any Kiwi and Australian sports fan, whatever sport it is, and rugby league's no different, so we're hoping that people will respond to that.
The Kiwis will also play Tonga in Auckland in June next year. The men's top seed Rafa Nadal is battling against Austrian Dominic Thiem to make it into the semi-finals at the US Tennis Open in New York. The fifth seed team won the first set of their quarter-final 6-love, with Nadal fighting back to win the second and third sets. The fourth went to a tie-break, which Thiem has just won to make it 2 sets all. The winner of the match will play Argentina's Juan Martín del Potro in the semi-finals. Meanwhile, Serena Williams has fought back from a breakdown in the first set to beat Czech 8th seed Karolina Pliskova 6-4, 6-3 to reach the semi-finals of the US Tennis Open. The 36-year-old, who's bidding for a record 7th title at Flushing Meadows, will play 19th seed Anastasia Setasova of Latvia for the place in the final. And the world champion New Zealand men's softball team have won the Intercontinental Cup tournament in the Czech Republic, beating Japan 5-1 in the final. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a BBC look at hard labour in Uganda. Simon Morris has a good hard look at the latest movies, while Eric Brenstrom keeps us up to date with the world's weather.
It's propagated by the agribusiness and also by academics who want to present themselves as saviours from a problem that actually doesn't exist.
Excellent. I'd like to be presented as a saviour.
It's Lately with Karen Hay on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to North Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of plenty in Taupō. Cloudy periods and a few showers. Showers becoming isolated south of Northland later tomorrow and fine spells increasing. South Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Southeast gales about Taranaki. Gisborne, showers, rain spreading north overnight. Hawke's Bay, rain heavy at times, southerly gales developing tomorrow evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, mostly cloudy with showers, gale southerlies. Coastal Marlborough and North Canterbury, cloudy with a few showers, gale southerlies about the Sounds. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however cloudy periods about South Canterbury and North Otago. And the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with periods of rain developing tomorrow morning as the southeast gales ease. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. As we go to air tonight, police have told us they've made 3 further arrests as part of an investigation into alleged race fixing. That means 10 people have now been charged following Operation Inca, the National Organised Crime Group investigation into alleged corruption in harness racing. Police say today's arrests were the result of a further 6 search warrants conducted in Christchurch this morning, taking the total number of search warrants to 17. This morning, police charged 7 people, all of whom have now been banned from every racecourse in the country by the Racing Integrity Unit. As we'll hear later on Checkpoint, race fixing with its collusion and intent is a difficult charge to prove. But the National Organised Crime Group clearly believes it has enough evidence with the first appearances in court today. Here's Bridget Burke.
Last race, green light. Head away third then is Bella Brooklyn, but she's under some pressure from He's Fast and Furious out 4 wide. Wider again, Johnny White, but he's coming to the race, still about 5 lengths off the leader. Storm Prince, 2:20 to go.
Race 11 in Nelson on Friday, June 8, now under the spotlight as police investigate allegations of harness horse race fixing and corruption.
Cullen, that one of Johnny White's come to an end, but it's Storm Prince a couple clear. Arcano's trying so hard, but not making enough of an indent, and Storm Prince is going to win the last. Storm Prince, a length and a half, has beaten Arcano contractual.
The race, won by Storm Prince, is now at the centre of the Operation Inca inquiry, with another driver in the event facing charges of manipulating the race's result. The former president of the Nelson Harness Racing Club, John McKenzie, says the investigation has attracted negative publicity and will hit the industry hard.
For this to happen, it doesn't help one bit because, as you can always understand, the industry revolves about people betting on racehorses. So if those people all of a sudden see there's no integrity in the racing, they're not going to bet on those races, and so the industry's going to suffer financially. So it's very, very, very disappointing.
10 people have now been charged following raids of high-profile horse stables across the South Island and Manawatu. The first to appear today in the Christchurch District Court was a 26-year-old charged with deception by match fixing and 2 counts of possessing Class B drugs. Prominent jockey Ricky May has competed and shared a dressing room with a number of those implicated in the scandal.
These people are all my friends and that, so, we're pretty close. We travel to races together, and I drive a lot of horses with trainers, and it comes just like a rugby team. You all get together, don't you? You're all enemies on the track, and off the track you're all mates.
Ricky May says the arrests have come as a shock. He says he thought his counterparts were just doing a special form of training.
I just thought they had better horses than me. That's probably what it is on the track. So, no, I honestly didn't have any idea.
In a statement released this afternoon, the Racing Integrity Unit said due to the serious nature of the charges, it was taking action under the rules of harness racing to exclude all those charged by police from entering a racecourse to attend race meetings, workouts and trials. John McKenzie says the industry has to stand firm.
I think harness racing will fight back very, very much, because there are some hell of a nice people involved in harness racing, and I've met many of them right throughout the country. It's a history of New Zealand. I think that they're strong enough to get their way through this.
4 men aged 34, 40, 41 and 44 are due to appear in Christchurch District Court next Tuesday on match-fixing charges, and police are not ruling out more arrests. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
So how might match fixing or race fixing occur? To answer that question, we'll be joined later in the program by Michael Guerin, who is the racing editor of the New Zealand Herald. That's coming up later on Checkpoint. It's 12 minutes past 5. After nearly 30 years, a Taranaki woman can finally live without a manslaughter conviction casting a shadow over her life. In 1989, Terry Friesen's baby daughter, Chantel Broughton, died after being severely shaken. Miss Friesen pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 6 months supervision. However, 13 years later, her ex-partner, Chantel's father, Brownie Broughton, confessed he had been responsible for the baby's death. He was jailed for 3 years, but Terry Friesen's conviction remained on the books. But, as Anne-Marie May reports, that all changed at a Court of Appeal hearing this afternoon.
Terry Friesen's lawyer, Philip Hamlin, sought permission from the court for his client's case to be heard, despite the fact that the time for an appeal had long run out. He said the evidence suggested both Terry Friesen and Brownie Broughton had been present at the time, though both initially denied any involvement in their baby's death. Chantel Broughton was 7 weeks old when she died in 1989 after suffering a severe brain injury and cracked ribs from being severely shaken. Philip Hamlin said when Brownie Broughton confessed and was jailed in 2002, no action was taken to clear Ms Friesen's name. The Crown lawyer Charlotte Brooks said it was accepted Broughton had been sentenced on the basis that he was the principal offender but had let Ms Friesen take the fall. She said his conviction constituted fresh evidence that could have led to a different verdict in Terry Friesen's case, and the Crown would not seek a retrial. Kelly Phillips, who has been supporting Terry Friesen, says it was amazing to be sitting next to her this afternoon when Justice Brown quashed the conviction.
To hear those words that the conviction is quashed, it's really incredible. I know she was overwhelmed. Hopefully this is the last time that this painful, horrible memory will be thrown up in her face in the pursuit of justice.
A law student at the time, Kelly Phillips contacted Terry Friesen after watching a television documentary about her case.
And we had a conversation for about an hour and a half, and it was like talking to an old friend. And I said, look, I'm not a lawyer yet. I'm a law student at the University of Canterbury, but I'm going to try my best to help you and do whatever I can. If I have to ring every solicitor or barrister in New Zealand, and if I can't get somebody to help you, then wait a few years when I'm one and I'll take it on myself.
Tim McKinnell, a former police detective turned private investigator, helped Kelly Phillips with Terry Friesen's case. He had previously been involved in the Tainapora case and says yet again flaws have been revealed in the criminal justice system.
This is another false confession case. Taina's one that we know about. There are others as well that have floated about. So it's a concern that these cases take so long to be dealt with and addressed. Terry's had to wait almost 30 years for this to be dealt with, and that's just not good enough.
Tim McKinnell says this case also raises questions about whether someone should have taken another look at Ms Friesen's situation after her ex-partner pleaded guilty.
Terry wasn't party to those proceedings. She vaguely knew what was going on, but the responsibility needs to rest with the system, and somebody in the criminal justice system should have done something about Terry's convictions a long time before now.
Kelly Phillips says having the conviction quashed means Terry Friesen can do things she has only dreamed of doing until now.
And get out and just enjoy going to apply for a job if she wants to, without having to have a conviction for manslaughter come up and explain that and feel ashamed of something. And I think that she's going to be at peace right now.
Kelly Phillips says Terry Friesen has 7 children who absolutely adore and love her, and several grandchildren. And it's great that despite the adversity she has lived through, she's managed to raise beautiful, happy, well-adjusted children who are a credit to her. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
5:15. Let's head north, quite a long way north as it happens. Jacinda Ardern jetted into Nauru today for the Leaders' Retreat at the Pacific Islands Forum, which has, of course, been overshadowed by the tiny islands, detention camps and issues of media freedom, or its lack. The Nauru government has taken a hard line with New Zealand journalists, publicly berating them for focusing too much on the hundreds of refugees being held there and not on the forum itself. And certainly the forum has major issues to address, climate change in particular. Our political reporter Gia Garrick is in Nauru, and Gia filed this report.
Jacinda Ardern touched down in Nauru first thing this morning and went straight into the all-day Leaders' Retreat. While the forum is the focus of her visit, she says it's unlikely she'll meet with refugees while in Nauru.
Having said that, I am keen to hear about their experiences. That's something, though, that would need to be facilitated by the Nauru government. It's not something that I have firmly set yet, but I hope to be able to come away from my time here with a bit more of an understanding of those experiences.
It has been a question posed by every refugee here. Will she meet us, and will she raise our issue once again with Australia? Ms Ardern is in Nauru for today only, 16 hours altogether. She reiterated that she did not want to give any of the refugees on the island a false hope.
I feel a personal responsibility not to raise the expectation of individual refugees. You know, we have said that we've got an offer to take 150, that they would go through the UNHCR screening process. That means that we don't control then who would be coming into New Zealand under that quota. So I do want to be cautious. These are people's lives.
But the purpose of Ms Ardern coming to Nauru isn't to speak with refugees, rather to negotiate and sign up to a new regional security agreement called the Boy Declaration. It's named after the constituency the President of Nauru, Wanaka, was first elected to Parliament to represent. Emerging issues like cybersecurity and increases in transnational crime are a focus, as is climate change and the depletion of fisheries in the Blue Pacific. On the sidelines of the Leaders' Retreat, the EU is promising to help protect the oceans of the Pacific. EU representative Jean-Louis Ville signed up to an agreement on behalf of the EU, while the Pacific Island Forum leaders were shut away in their meeting.
We trust that we are now at the right time to form a joint alliance and coalition on issues related to international ocean governance, for which the Pacific European Programme will form a very solid foundation. I welcome that climate change as a security risk and strengthening regional maritime security were both addressed during this forum.
The Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters has spent his day meeting with representatives of Norway, Britain and Japan, signing up to a joint funding agreement with the latter on climate change. New Zealand is contributing $3 million to an $8 million Pacific Climate Change Centre, and Japan is contributing the rest.
It is a worldwide problem, most keenly felt in the Caribbean and here in the Pacific.
The Boy Declaration and these sideline agreements are the centrepiece of the Pacific Islands Forum, and the media today were all present for those signings. That will have pleased the government of Nauru, which has come down hard on New Zealand media for its reporting, saying the focus has been too much on the refugee situation rather than the forum. In a tweet, it wrote some New Zealand journalists seem upset they have to follow the rules when it came to speaking with refugees, saying the media would have no issues in Nauru if they did. TVNZ journalist Barbara Drever was picked up and detained by police while speaking with a refugee outside a restaurant yesterday. She was held for 3 hours at the police station. The government's online statements go on to say misinformation has been spread by the media during this forum, naming specific organisations including RNZ. From Nauru for Checkpoint, Gia Garrick.
Home again, a complaint has been lodged against a Christchurch councillor after an explosive few days at the Christchurch City Council. Coastal Councillor David East told media earlier this week he believes the district plan has been tampered with. He believes a clause that would have made it easier to build and develop in the flood-prone area was taken out sometime after an independent hearings panel finalised it. He says that's left his constituents potentially millions of dollars out of pocket. Now, yesterday the Mayor stood him down as chair of a council committee, and in the last hour has confirmed a code of conduct complaint has been received against Mr East from the council's chief executive. Mr East is considering legal action. Our reporter Logan Church went to New Brighton to ask him what's going on.
I was called into a meeting with the Mayor where obviously she's not at all happy with the process I've undertaken to bring this matter to public attention. In my defence, I would say that over a lengthy period I and other members of this community have tried to raise these issues and we have never achieved any satisfaction. We're generally just told, well, that's the way the IHP want it, and we just don't get nowhere. So I've taken this rather different approach to things. Mainly, I suppose, from my point of view, a frustration that something that's plainly obvious that should be done doesn't seem to get much traction in the normal channels.
Why do you think the Mayor was not happy with how you had dealt with this?
Principally because she thought I should have brought it to council in the first instance. But however, as I said a moment ago, that approach has proved fruitless over quite some time, and unfortunately on a number of issues where the coastal area is concerned, there's not a lot of empathy within council or council staff to be doing things in this side of town.
Is there an expectation from senior leadership at the council that councillors toe the party line?
Yes, I believe there is a huge influence of central government politics in local government, and it's very prevalent at Christchurch City. I'm in a minority, being one of a very few that aren't aligned to the Labour Party. So yeah, there are many instances where a political point of view has come to agreed amongst the those councillors, and they caucus readily or frequently on those sort of matters.
You mentioned in your letter last night that you're considering legal advice. What is that over?
I was pretty concerned about the press release that council sent out on the Monday afternoon after my press conference. It was a bit disparaging, brought into question my capability, my knowledge of these things, and I wasn't particularly happy with that. Yeah, I'm looking into whether I need to seek any redress over those sort of things.
So you're considering defamation?
Well, I'm looking into it. I wouldn't say I'm absolutely hell-bent on doing it, but certainly I was pretty annoyed about the manner in which I was portrayed. The only thing I would say in conclusion really is the ultimate end game. We want that serious misinterpretation of the independent hearings panel's ruling redressed. As a serious injustice been put on the people of South Shore, South New Brighton and Redcliffs, and they should never have been exposed to that level of expense, unnecessary expense and psycho stress and trauma that goes along with it.
Is this the start of a mayoral run for you?
Never discount anything. I never had any aspirations to be the mayor, but maybe.
That's Coastal Councillor David East talking to our excellent Christchurch reporter Logan Church. Now, a council spokesperson says the Mayor Leanne Dalzell has now received a formal complaint from the Chief Executive on behalf of the organisation, and she will be discussing it with the Chief Executive tomorrow. Ms Dalzell says Councillor East has been stood down from his role of Chair of the Regulatory Performance Committee, to which the District Plan staff would report while the investigation of the complaint takes place. Neither the Mayor nor the Chief Executive would be interviewed by Checkpoint tonight. We will keep an eye on what is happening here. Let's go to Washington now, where the US President Donald Trump has labelled the new bombshell book on his presidency as just another bad book and claims its author has a lot of credibility problems. The author, Bob Woodward, is the highly regarded Washington Post reporter who exposed the Watergate scandal. He's written a book called Fear about the Trump White House, based on interviews with key staff, and it contains explosive details and allegations. Here's the BBC's Nick Bryant.
Today the White House looked as stately and elegant as ever. But according to the new book, this mansion is home to a presidency in chaos, a West Wing suffering a nervous breakdown, an administrative coup d'etat. It details how senior aides tried to prevent Donald Trump from wielding his presidential pen, hiding official documents from his desk to stop him withdrawing America from the NAFTA free trade agreement, and ignoring his suggestion to assassinate the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. It quotes the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, describing the president as unhinged. He's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town.
I think it's going to be a lesson that has to be absorbed by future presidents.
What gives the book so much credence is the authority of its author, Bob Woodward, whose work alongside Carl Bernstein during Watergate did so much to bring down Richard Nixon. Woodward is a Washington institution.
Hello, Bob.
President Trump, how are you?
How are you? How you doing? Okay?
Real well. I'm turning on my tape recorder
that's
with
okay.
your permission.
Bob Woodward finally managed to speak to the president, but only after the book was finished.
You know, it's a tough look at the world and your administration and you.
Right. Well, I assume that means it's going to be a negative book, but, you know, I'm sort of 50% used to that. That's all right. Some are good and some are bad. Sounds like this is going to be a bad one.
So help me God. It's certainly a bad one for the embattled Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who Mr. Trump apparently described as mentally retarded and a dumb southerner. And there are insights into the legal advice the president received about talking to the special counsel Robert Mueller. Don't testify, his former lawyer told him. It's either that or an orange jumpsuit. The president last appeared before the cameras yesterday on what looked like an aborted golf trip. And now, yet another diversion. The White House claims the book is nothing more than fabricated stories, many by former disgruntled employees. John Kelly has issued a statement saying he didn't call the president an idiot. But tellingly, perhaps, the White House hasn't used the phrase fake news, its usual blanket condemnation of the media. Maybe that's because it's up against Bob Woodward, a journalist of such rigour, a journalist known for his fairness. And many readers will see in this book an accurate rendering of history.
Nick Bryant from the BBC with that report. It's 28 minutes past 5. A powerful typhoon is now moving northward and away from Japan, but it has left behind it a trail of destruction. At least 7 people were killed by Typhoon Jebi as it brought severe winds of up to 200 km an hour, heavy torrential rain to southern and central areas of the main islands and the cities of Osaka and Kobe. The BBC's Robin Brandt reports from the capital, Tokyo.
Japan knew that this storm was coming, but some were still caught out. This woman is screaming, "It's going, it's going," as she filmed a lorry that was blown across 2 lanes of motorway on a bridge before it tipped over. A strip of its thin metal side was ripped off by the winds. A car next to it was also sent tumbling. Both just about managed to avoid falling into the water below. Japan is used to extreme weather, but Typhoon Jebi is the strongest in 25 years. The damage is widespread around the worst-hit area of Osaka. Kansai International Airport is all but submerged in water. Officials have said around 3,000 people are stranded there because a bridge which connects the airport to the mainland has been badly damaged by a ship being continually blown into the structure. More than 1 million people have been advised to leave their homes. For those who have already left, the wait to return will be an anxious one, with more rain and wind forecast.
Robin Brandt for the BBC in Tokyo. With Checkpoint on RNZ, it's coming up to 5:30. Before 6 o'clock, Nona's just arrived with business news. We're looking at a really low dollar rate against the US, so we're going to talk about that and what's going on there. Backlash and support for Nike over its new ad campaign featuring American footballer Colin Kaepernick. Half of Countdown supermarkets now have no plastic bags at all, so how are customers coping? And more than a decade after they were stolen, the red slippers, ruby red slippers, Judy Garland wore in the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz, have been recovered. All of that before 6 o'clock. But ladies and gentlemen, with the time at, what's the time, Katrina?
Oh wow, 5:30, John Campbell.
Take
That's
it
amazing.
Take it away, KB.
A private investigator who helped a Taranaki woman overturned her manslaughter conviction says it has parallels with the Taina Pora case. In 1989, Terry Friesen's baby daughter died after being severely shaken. Ms. Friesen pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 6 months supervision. 13 years later, her ex-partner confessed he caused the baby's death and was jailed for 3 years. Despite that, Ms. Friesen's conviction remained on the books until it was quashed this afternoon by the Court of Appeal. The Prime Minister says she's unlikely to meet with refugees while she's in Nauru unless she runs into them in the community. Jacinda Ardern has been at an all-day leaders retreat at the Pacific Islands Forum today. She emerged a short time ago and said logistically it's unlikely she'll be able to meet any refugees formally. One of 2 men arrested over match fixing in the harness racing industry has had his bid for name suppression turned down. The names, photos and biographical details of some of the accused were published in an article on Stuff. The hearings for both men were adjourned after the matter was raised earlier today. Matt Anderson's lawyer, Phil Watts, asked for the article to be taken down, but this wasn't granted by Judge Tony Couch. He granted interim name suppression for the other man and remanded the pair on bail. Meanwhile, the number of people arrested as part of the investigation has now risen to 10. This afternoon, 3 more men aged 30, 42 and 49 were to appear in the Christchurch District Court on drug-related charges. One is also facing a charge of unlawful possession of a restricted weapon. The Minister for Regional Development has made a case to the Reserve Bank Governor that he should stop banks from shutting their rural branches. Shane Jones last week launched a broadside against the Australian-owned banks, accusing them of gouging provincial New Zealanders to channel profits across the Tasman. He met with the Governor Adrian Orr today, along with the Ministers for Finance and Economic Development. Mr Jones says Mr Orr will look into whether he can do anything within his statutory responsibilities. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Which is ages away. Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello.
New Zealand dollar fallen to its last level in 2.5 years. What is it? What did it close at? What have you got?
65.5 cents right at the moment. So yesterday we were at 66.
Yeah. So what's behind all of this?
Well, it's basically what's happening is really the US dollar is the story, and it's the US economy. So they had some manufacturing data overnight, and it was really strong. The strongest in 14 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of activity going on there.
So this is strength in the US rather than weakness in the Kiwi, although low interest rates won't be helping the Kiwi.
No, that's right. But also, and that's right, because in the United States, the backdrop against that is rising interest rates. So we're in a situation where our economy would be sluggish. We've seen business confidence surveys indicating things are down. The government's taking that seriously. Well, so should we all, because that's indicating that our economic growth is losing some steam. And the U.S. economy, meanwhile, is just moving ahead. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are doing a lot of deals on trade, or rather not doing a lot of deals on trade, the tariffs and so on, may see a lot of big companies, multinationals, and, consider when they build their next plant, building it in the United States. And this all is driving up the U.S. economy and could, in the short term at least, make a significant difference to, say, regions outside of the U.S. North America right now. Canada is supposed to start talks again with the United States later today. But, Donald Trump has posted his tweets indicating he doesn't really care which way the wind blows there.
No, he doesn't. He's not a fan of NAFTA, is he?
Exactly. So I spoke with Phil Borkin from ANZ. He's a senior strategist there and looks closely at the currency. He says the Kiwi is struggling. We have a little bit of him talking what's going on.
What's unusual at the moment is that the US economy is outperforming significantly the rest of the world. If the US economy was strong together with the rest of the world, so it was a good, big, positive global growth story, you'd actually typically expect the New Zealand dollar to do well in that environment. New Zealand's quite leveraged into that global story through our commodity exports, etc. But right now, because it's largely the US on its own, the rest of the world is struggling a little bit, and certainly the New Zealand domestic economy's got its own challenges as well. Then that stronger US dollar is actually just boosting the US dollar and what it means for the Fed tightening cycle. So we're actually getting a different impact. And at a time when, businesses are weak, business confidence weak here, you've got dairy prices rolling off, people are debating whether or not the RBNZ is going to be cutting interest rates. The New Zealand dollar is struggling for friends.
And that's the ANZ senior strategist, Phil Borkin. Now, just on the upside, we have had some stories recently about some potential good trade deals for New Zealand in Asia Pacific. We know that there is one that's maybe in the works. It's the ASEAN nations. That's 6 other countries, including New Zealand, China, and India. Those talks have been slow for years, 6 years. But it's looking like maybe there would be a deal there. The APEC Secretariat, Alan Bollard, has indicated that may come together.
Yes, I was reading an op-ed somewhere, maybe Singapore, that suggests that China's looking more flexible as a result of the gamesmanship it's having with the United States, right?
That's so
yeah.
And also, I was speaking with an expert on China, and he said that the Chinese, unlike our business confidence surveys, which are in the doldrums in China, they are, rocketing ahead. So we've got a very large economy in our region that may very well spell some good news for us.
And wants to flex some muscle. Yeah,
that's
thanks.
right.
No, okay, other than the dollar at that low rate against the US,
yes.
What else happened?
Well, our market, we fell by more than 2/3% today, down 64 points to 9,228. But of course, that's against the backdrop of trade and some reduced dairy prices today. And so, that was us. And just to recap, the dollar, we were trading at 65.6 US cents, 91.2 Australian, and 51 pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed, Nona. Appreciate it. Let's go back to the United States. I think this is our second or third trip there tonight, where some Americans are applauding Nike, some are burning their Nike gear, but almost all Americans are noticing that the man who took a knee during the national anthem before his American football games is now the new face of Nike Let's Do It campaign. The Nike advert says, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, referencing Colin Kaepernick's anti-racism and police brutality campaign costing him his football career. The response was strongly polarised. Some really into it, others, well, the Twitter hashtags just burn it and boycott Nike trending immediately. People actually setting fire to their Nike shoes and posting the footage online. The BBC's Charlotte Gallagher reports.
Pair of Nike shoes, so everybody to see. Throwing this in the fire because of Colin Kaepernick is now the face of Nike.
Just one of the videos posted on social media of people burning their Nike trainers and clothing. The country singer John Rich has got involved too, tweeting a photo of a pair of socks with the brand's logo hacked off. Colin Kaepernick divides opinion in the US. Some, including President Trump, say he's disgraceful, a traitor for kneeling during the national anthem. For others, Kaepernick is a hero who sacrificed his career to protest against oppression.
I mean, if I didn't love Nike enough, they made Colin Kaepernick the face of their Just Do It campaign for the 30th anniversary? Oh my God. If you're mad, don't burn your Nikes. Send them to me. I wear a size 12. Thank you.
Following the announcement by Nike, several prominent figures expressed support, such as the tennis star Serena Williams, the former director of the CIA John Brennan, and somewhat surprisingly, the ex-Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The stock market didn't react positively to the news, though, with Nike shares tumbling. But it's unlikely the move will have a long-lasting negative effect. The story has generated a huge amount of publicity, and branding experts say Nike will have researched the likely backlash and decided to just do it.
That report from the BBC. It's 20 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. A lawyer is calling for an overhaul of the government's artificial limb service, saying amputees here are receiving substandard treatment compared to other countries. Checkpoint's looked at this a bit over the past year or two. There are about 4,000 amputees in New Zealand, the majority of whom are under the care of the New Zealand Artificial Limb Service, or NZALS, the only provider with contracts with district health boards and ACC. But some amputees have refused to be treated by the Crown Agency, saying despite spending years in its care, they never got limbs that fitted properly. Continuing her investigation, here's Michelle Cook.
I have never had comfortable socket in this country in 20 years of being an amputee. It has given me ulcers, pain, suffering, and not even the ability to be able to walk without excruciating pain.
That's Robin One-Leg. He officially changed his name after losing his leg in a car accident 20 years ago. Like many amputees, his care is funded through ACC, which has only ever contracted the New Zealand Artificial Limb Service as a provider for prosthetic services. Robin One-Leg says he was forced into the system because as a Ministry of Health or ACC amputee client, NZALS is the only option.
You know, I'm just one amputee in the 4,000. From what I believe, there are many amputees in this position, and many of them have got to the point where they're fed up with having to waste their time going to a limb centre, wherever it may be, and not actually walking away comfortable and happy.
Lawyer Martha Coleman is representing a number of amputees. She says some prosthetists do not have the skills they need and are underqualified to do the job of a clinician. About 50% of NZALS's prosthetists, the people who evaluate, fabricate and fit artificial limbs, hold degree qualifications. The rest hold diplomas. In countries like Canada, the United Kingdom and the United States, prosthetists are required to hold at least a degree.
If other jurisdictions believe that a degree, or in the case of North America, a postgraduate degree is the minimum qualification, it is unfathomable why it should be a lesser qualification in New Zealand. The answer must be that they're not doing a good enough job, and it's got to change.
Ms Coleman has written to ACC, the Health Minister and the Social Development and Disabilities Minister Carmel Sepuloni, requesting they make it mandatory for prosthetists to hold a degree. She says nurses, physiotherapists and doctors all require a degree qualification.
There is no reason why in the prosthetic industry should be treated any differently. Doesn't happen in other health industries, shouldn't happen here.
Ms Coleman is also calling for the industry to be regulated under the Health Professionals Competency Assurance Act. The New Zealand Orthotics and Prosthetics Association appoints members with degrees and diplomas, unlike Australia, where those with diplomas can still practice but struggle to access funding. NZALS CEO Sean Gray says while his staff hold a mix of diplomas and degrees, they are all qualified to work with amputees.
There are no people on our team that are not qualified to do the job. Everybody has qualifications, and in saying that, a large part of our prosthetists are Polytech or CIT qualified, and I believe that those types of qualifications, that all New Zealanders should be able to rely on them both now and into the future. That part of my workforce are doing a great job.
A diploma in prosthetics was offered in New Zealand in the past, but there is now no degree or diploma offered here, which means New Zealand is increasingly reliant on an international workforce. Checkpoint has spoken to several amputees who, after years under NZALS's care, have refused to return, and ACC eventually agreed to send them to one of the few private providers in the country. But they say they had to fight to go elsewhere. Mr Robin One-Leg needed a new leg about a year ago and says NZALS has tried but failed to make one that fitted properly in that time.
I have been on relatively strong painkillers just to be able to survive with the pain and the suffering and the stress that I'm under. I use a wheelchair. I have home help provided for me by ACC because I'm not in a position where I'm capable to do it all on my own without a fitting prosthetic leg.
ACC's latest contract with NZALS has been in place for a decade, but it is now redesigning it and plans to put it out to tender next year. Mr. Gray says his staff work closely with the universities and academia to integrate their innovative thinking.
The whole team, I can put my hand on my heart and say we come in every day to help people, and so when we hear these stories, which are isolated in a few, they're really disappointing to the whole team, and so we do our best every day to make sure that we are up to date on our training, that we know what new technologies are out that can help them.
Robin Onelegg's request to be seen by a private provider was approved last month, but he says it took 20 years to get to this point. For Checkpoint, Michelle Cook.
Lots of feedback coming in from people with the experience of NZALS. We will call you if we haven't already. Meanwhile, the Minister of Health, David Clark, says he's considering a response to Martha Coleman's letter and won't comment. In the meantime, the Minister responsible for NZALS, Campbell says she's also considering a response to the issues raised by Ms Coleman and declined an interview. She said in a statement, the concerns raised by Ms Coleman are complex and require careful consideration, and she will thoroughly explore them. Do get in touch, 2101, or email, as many of you are, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz if you would like to be part of our investigation into the NZALS. Wanaka, let's head there now. It used to be Queenstown's sleepy cousin over the hill, but now some residents say they feel like they need to win lotto to be able to afford to live in the booming and increasingly pricey town. They say even families on two incomes are struggling to make ends meet. A feature of life in an increasingly large number of cities in New Zealand. Wanaka, a relatively small place for this to be happening. And our Otago Southland reporter, Tess Brunton, went to Wanaka and Tess filed this report.
Visitors from around the world are drawn to Wanaka by its namesake lake and views of snow-capped mountains. But that stunning natural beauty comes at a price. Sinead, who didn't want her full name to be revealed, and her family moved to Wanaka just before winter settled in last year. She started work as a cleaner and her partner got a scaffolding job. But their initial excitement wore off after her partner's accommodation supplement from work ended earlier this year. Their son was born and their bills started piling up.
What we were paying weekly couldn't cover what we were using. So yeah, the financial pressures just became quite a lot, and then it ended up that we were just working to live week to week. And then we were using a credit card to live week to week after that, because it was becoming that we weren't being able to manage to pay certain bills when they'd pop up.
Sinead's partner sometimes worked more than 40 hours a week, but she says it didn't seem to make a difference to their finances. The family of 5 was paying $450 a week for a double garage that had been converted into a 2-bedroom house, and basics were expensive.
It's like I was sending my partner to Christchurch to buy things like potatoes because they were like $15 for a 10 kg. And I don't know whether that's just Wanaka or what it is, but the prices of just fresh fruit and stuff is just, you can't sustainably live there and feed your family properly and pay your bills.
Eventually the family sought support and food parcels from Community Networks Wanaka so they could stay in the area they loved. But that wasn't enough, and they've just moved back to Christchurch to live with her partner's parents. They've racked up about $5,000 in debt. Stuart Hawkins from Presbyterian Support's Family Works program says some Wanaka residents will never get their heads above water financially.
We used to be one of the few, organisations working in that area, but now there's several which is actually helping to cope with that demand. But I guess it's the intensity of the referrals now. They're quite complex.
He says there are a growing number of people facing large debts with incomes that could barely cover their living costs. And he doesn't know whether current services will cope. His organisation currently supports about 55 clients in Wanaka, including 30 who have sought support for financial struggles.
Projections for population growth, if they are what they are, then it's not going to be enough.
Wanaka-based Anglican Family Care Team leader Vicky McDermott says families have less disposable income as they're faced with higher rental costs. The median Wanaka rent is $550 a week, higher than many central suburbs in Wellington and Christchurch. Vicky McDermott says the growing population and influx of tourists are exacerbating the situation for Wanaka residents who are less wealthy.
Some of the people are invisible. I think when people look at Wanaka they see a lot of wealth, but there is invisibility about some people that are struggling, I would say.
Support organisations are hoping improved social services, including affordable mental health services, will be on the cards when the Queenstown Lakes District Council comes up with its Wanaka Master Plan. A draft master plan is due to be finalised by June next year. In Wanaka for Checkpoint, this is Tess Brunton.
We'd love to hear from you if you live in Wanaka and are struggling to make ends meet. Text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We've been all over the world tonight. We're back in Auckland, just over the Harbour Bridge from where I am sitting here. It would be fair to say that Tongan students are a tiny minority at Westlake Girls High School on Auckland's North Shore. The secondary school has a population of 2,200 students, 2,200. 1% of them are Tongan. But the students have rallied to celebrate Tongan Language Week and promote their culture, keen to do their bit to halt the declining rate of Tongan language speakers in New Zealand. Indira Stewart has more.
A quiz and a dance battle right beside the school's tuck shop is just one of the ways these students are celebrating Tongan Language Week.
What is the colour of the Tongan flag? Yep, correct.
Year 9 student Pieta Fulamuel says she's enjoying the celebrations.
Thank you.
Especially because she's a huge fan of Tonga's national rugby league team, Mate Maatonga.
I love how everyone just got together and just supported that big team, and I love how we got a really good result as well. I still think that I think it was the English match, I think that was a try, so I still thought they shouldn't have gone to the into the finals, but that's okay.
Of the school's 2,200 students, 84% of them are European and Asian, and only 5% are Pacifica. Pieta says ethnic differences within the school, no matter how small, are celebrated equally.
I just love how people aren't afraid to show what their culture is and how they really are, who they really are. Basically is really supportive of all the cultures, because we have different types of cultures and we all respect that.
Meliseni Tu'inukuafe, Elizabeth Taufa and Kika Moala are all part of the school's Pacific Island Committee who run events to help celebrate Pacific culture. Meliseni says her first year at the school was daunting.
When you go into a classroom, you're basically the only islander in that classroom. So then you're kind of used to it now. But there are a lot of Pacific Islander prefects that guided me through my year 9, that helped me.
The girls say that while they once felt intimidated, their cultural differences have only strengthened friendships.
We grew together as sisters, family, so our bond is very tight. Yeah, it's awesome to see the other girls support us, especially if they're not Tongan. Yeah. It's encouraging to embrace our culture more here.
Also having teachers that are not Tongan helping us is a great way of supporting us.
The school's diversity is similarly reflected in the community's population. Government figures show around 76% of the Devonport Takapuna Local Board area's population are European, with its Pacifica community making up only 2%. Teacher Rachel Bickerstaff looks after the Pacific students and says it's important for all students to have support to celebrate their cultures.
They feel good about themselves if their culture is part of a school like ours. We have less than 100 Pacific Island students, so it's quite difficult for them. They enjoy embracing their culture in a school like ours.
Alongside the celebrations, some of the Year 9 students recently studied the art of Tongan tapa cloth. The decorated bark cloth is highly valued in Tongan culture, but the practice is a dying art form. Sophie Tucker and Ivy Tan were among those who learned how to make their own.
It was really interesting to see how the Tongan originally made the tapa with just natural resources. It was fun how you could choose what to add to your tapa, so it was your own.
It's very fun. I think it's very good opportunity to learn different cultures.
Ms. Bickerstaff says the exposure to different cultures is good for all the students.
Well, it's healthy. because this is Auckland, and you know we live in a multicultural society, and I think the school thinks that it's important that everybody sees that.
Tongan Language Week runs until Saturday. For Checkpoint, Indira Stewart.
Lovely story, Indira. This from Stephen about the artificial limb service. I've been taking my father to the limb centre. He's blind and a double amputee below the knee. Because I have to go with him, I'm familiar with the service, and after 5 years I have to say my father and I are very happy with the service and skill at the centre at Burwood. And strangely, the people we see leaving are also happy. I would be very cautious about creeping privatisation of the service. Stephen Howard from Ototahi, Christchurch. Thank you, Stephen. Lovely to hear from you. An Auckland kickboxing gym is now ranked 3rd best in the world by the mixed martial artist organisation, the UFC. City Kickboxing continues to grow after recently signing their 4th fighter and has been recognised alongside some of the most elite international gyms. Full stop. Ravinda Hunia went to visit them to see what all the fuss is about.
Egos are left at the door at City Kickboxing. Fighters and fitness enthusiasts of every level coming together to train on the same mats for a common purpose. And UFC middleweight star Israel Adesanya says this environment is what breeds the best.
I'm just another guy, you know, like a lot of faces come and go, but yeah, it's been awesome. Ups and downs, smiles and frowns, but that's the ebbs and flows of life or in anything. It's just sticking through it and knowing who you are, knowing what you want out of life, knowing what you want out of this. You know, not everyone has to be a world champion or aspire to be a great fighter or whatever. Some people just want to come in here and get some work, let loose.
Nestled away in Auckland's CBD, it's arguably become the most successful fighting gym in the country, with its elite athletes continuing to rise to international stardom. There are now 5 New Zealand-based MMA fighters officially signed to the UFC, 4 of which who train here at City Kickboxing in Auckland. I came here to find out what it is about this gym that creates world-class athletes, and soon came to realise it's a case of who. 11 years ago, and a fighter at the time, head coach and gym owner Eugene Berriman and his team started to build what is now becoming an empire. 3 of his UFC fighters are coming off wins and 1 is yet to debut, and Berriman says the secret are his relationships that far exceeds the gym's success.
Bringing them to victory and seeing them happy is part of the reason that I do it. That gives me a lot of joy. Also, especially with these professional guys, a win means not just their own personal happiness, but security for their future.
A future UFC lightweight fighter Dan Hooker believes isn't possible without Berriman. Hooker became the first New Zealand-based fighter to receive a UFC contract, and his gamble to pursue his dream out of Auckland has paid off.
You know, it's a very selfish sport. So I put, you have to succeed, you have to put your own career first. And so I'm here, training here because Eugene's our best coach and this is the best gym in the world.
Featherweight fighter Shane Young moved from Napier to train here because what the facility lacks in size, it makes up for in culture.
There are other gyms in New Zealand and across the world that have better facilities than this, better location, easier for the fighters to get there or something, or maybe they have opportunities that, like, say, a cryotherapy thing right there, but none of that stuff is a coach passing on the knowledge that trusts in his fighters and cares about his fighters. That is the most important thing.
And for a real chance to feature on the world's largest MMA stage, Berriman doesn't ask for much in return.
I won't train anybody who's not my friend. So we have to be, you have to become my friend first before I train you. I have to respect you, you have to respect me, and you have to be a good person is my general rule before I even begin to give you some time.
A humble legacy in the making, built on culture and an appetite for success. Mo te hōtaka o te pōnei, ko Ravinda Hunia aho.
Let's head back to Nauru now, where the president, a controversial figure, just asked the ABC, has surprised Jacinda Ardern with a song that mentions her baby, Neve, with melodies and lyrics that read, and I quote, "A little baby star has been born." Ms Ardern had just unveiled a plaque at the Nauru campus of the University of the South Pacific because New Zealand puts money into the UFB network there. The president and his troupe then launched into the 4-verse song with a chorus and a bridge. Wait for it. A little baby star is born.
and joyous Nauru. You'll never forget Aotearoa, our friend.
There's some pretty excellent harmonies here. Gia Garrick, our RNZ reporter up at Nauru at the Pacific Islands Forum, recorded that being sung to the Prime Minister. Lots of feedback coming in, and because of that lovely piece of music, we'll bring it to you after 6. But New Zealand Artificial Limb Service people in Wanaka telling us about how tough life is there. It's fantastic to hear from you. Thank you. Text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. Katrina Batten is sitting magnificently calm and composed beside me, and I shall relax and enjoy the pips and then the news.
RNZ News at 6. Malo Elele. Good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. A private investigator who helped a Taranaki woman overturn her conviction for manslaughter says the case highlights the need for a Criminal Cases Review Commission. Terry Friesen's baby daughter died in 1989 after being severely shaken and was sentenced to 6 months supervision after pleading guilty to manslaughter. 13 years later, her ex-partner Brownie Broughton confessed he had been responsible for the baby's death and was jailed for 3 years. However, Ms Friesen's conviction remained on the books until it was quashed this afternoon by the Court of Appeal. Tim McKinnell, a former police detective who worked on the case, says someone should have taken another look at Ms Friesen's situation after her ex-partner pleaded guilty.
Terry wasn't party to those proceedings. She vaguely knew what was going on, but the responsibility needs to rest with the system, and somebody in the criminal justice system should have done something about Terry's convictions a long time before now.
A former police detective, Tim McKinnell. The Prime Minister says it's unlikely she'll meet with refugees while in Nauru for the Pacific Islands Forum. Jacinda Ardern has emerged from the all-day leaders retreat to speak with journalists and unveil a plaque at the University of the South Pacific. She says logically it doesn't look likely that she'll meet with any refugees today, although she may run into them in the community. Ms Ardern says she would like to hear more about the refugees' experiences, but says that's something that would have to be facilitated by the Nauru government. Napier City Council says its sewage system could start to overflow if residents don't reduce their wastewater over the next 36 hours. People are being asked not to take baths or flush toilets for the next 36 hours as torrential rain has overloaded the system. In a Facebook post, the council says showers should be short and leave the washing and dishes for another day. Its chief executive, Wayne Jack, says this will help get the wastewater system back on track.
So if you're going for number one, try not to flush the toilet, just hold it for a little bit. If you can, just avoid doing any washing of the clothes overnight. The Napier people can just help us at this point in time, particularly we've got another period of heavy rain coming, then it will just help us to keep on top of the network.
Wayne Jack says the council has committed $10 million to improving Napier's wastewater system, but it'll take several years to complete. A 20-year-old woman sentenced to 6.5 years in prison over the kidnapping of 2 women in Auckland earlier this year was on bail at the time and had a raft of previous offences. Lenora Mahanga and 3 teenagers were charged over the May kidnapping of the women who had confronted the group who were trying to steal their car. The Auckland District Court Judge Brooke Gibson told Mahanga she was a mini crime wave. She had previous offences for shoplifting, stealing a car and driving under the influence of alcohol. She was training to be a childcare worker. The victims were assaulted, bundled into the boot of a stolen car and driven to South Auckland, where the car crashed down a 5-metre bank. A fleet of speedboats is ferrying thousands of stranded passengers from an airport in Japan cut off by Typhoon Jebi. It's left a trail of destruction across the west of the country, hitting major cities like Osaka, Kobe and Kyoto. The BBC's Robin Brandt reports.
Jebi was the 21st typhoon of the season for Japan, but it was the strongest to hit in 25 years. One of the country's busiest airports was worst affected. At one point, only a runway was visible at Kansai International. Much of the rest of the concrete was submerged. The water has almost all receded now, but thousands are still stranded after a bridge connecting the airport to the mainland was damaged by a ship blown off course. More than 1 million homes here are still without power.
Robin Brandt in Tokyo. Almost 2,000 staff at the Ministry of Justice are voting on whether to strike later this month after their pay negotiations stalled. The proposed strike is set for September the 19th and aims to get a fair pay deal for low-paid and female workers. A spokesperson for the Public Service Association, Erin Polachuk, says the ministry does not properly value some female-dominated roles. She says the average female justice employee earns 15% less than the average male. Ms Polachuk says the strike action is a last resort, but staff feel they have no other choice. An armed man is still on the run in central Wellington following a robbery at a pharmacy near the main train station. The police say the man threatened 2 staff members at the chemist's on Bunny Street about midday and stole medication and cash. He then ran off towards Featherston Street carrying 2 yellow shopping bags. The 4 people in the pharmacy at the time were not injured. It's 5 minutes past 6. To sport, top seed Rafa Nadal's US Tennis Open quarter-final against Austria's Dominic Thiem is on a knife edge. Thiem trounced Nadal 6-love in the first set, but the Spaniard fought back to win the second and third. The fourth went to a tie-break, which Thiem won to level the score at 2 sets all. The fifth set, too, has just gone to a tie-break to decide who'll advance to the final 4. Changes are in the wind for the All Blacks for Saturday's Rugby Championships test against Argentina, but just how far coach Steve Hansen goes remains to be seen, as rugby reporter Joe Porter explains.
First 5 Richie Mo'unga was running water in the Bledisloe test to get a deeper insight into how the All Blacks make tactical decisions on the field. Is that a sign he'll start? It seems his best chance in a match the All Blacks should win, but coach Steve Hansen is more conservative than many think and could stick with Beauden Barrett if TJ Perenara starts at halfback and Ngani Laumape at second 5. Nehe Milner-Skudder looks set to get his shot on the wing, meaning a reshuffle will be needed in the back 3. Damien McKenzie could start at fullback and move to first 5 later in the game to get 2 hits from 1 selection. Sam Cane and Ryan Crotty have apparently gotten over their concussions, but Adi Savia should start at open side with the midfielders unchanged. This is Joe Porter.
And Nadal has just won the tiebreaker and the last of the semi-finals. The Breakers have signed NBA player Sean Long for the upcoming ANBL basketball season. At 2 metres tall, Long replaces Jarrell Benamon, who never arrived at the Auckland club from the United States due to family issues. Long had a short-term contract with the Philadelphia 76ers 2 seasons ago and has spent most of the past 2 seasons in the NBA G League. That's the news.
Banning shark cages.
Power divers pulling into a bay, and before they even get in the water, they've got a shark swimming around them. Not a pleasant thought, trying to hop in the water when there's a great white wandering around.
Prisoners rattling the bars.
Barking and snarling was done deliberately with our inspectors present. I think it was an attempt by the gang members there to try and demonstrate who was in control.
Media barred in Nauru.
There's erosion of press freedom in the Pacific steadily over the last 5 years, ironically over the same period that the detention centres have been in Nauru and Manus.
No holds barred. Morning reports with Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, leading Irish public intellectual Fintan O'Toole discusses Brexit and its impact on Ireland. And after 10, photojournalist Lalage Snow on her new book War Gardens, which journeys through conflict zones via gardens and gardeners. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to North Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods and a few showers. Showers becoming isolated south of Northland later tomorrow and fine spells increasing. South Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Southeast gales about Taranaki. Gisborne, showers, rain spreading north overnight. Hawke's Bay, rain, heavy at times. Southerly gales developing tomorrow evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, mostly cloudy with showers, gale southerlies. Coastal Marlborough and North Canterbury, cloudy with a few showers, gale southerlies about the Sounds. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however cloudy periods about South Canterbury and North Otago. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, periods of rain developing tomorrow morning as southeast gales ease. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Thanks everyone for being with us. Let's go back to this race fixing, all these charges and this major investigation. The Racing Integrity Unit has responded to yesterday's police raids and this morning's race fixing charges against 7 people. 3 more added this afternoon, a total of 10 people charged now with bans against those charged from entering a racecourse. Police have charged well, most of the 10 with match fixing, 1 man with a deception by match fixing, some of them with drugs charges related to Class B drugs. 1 woman, I think, has been charged with supplying Class B drugs. The operation is unprecedented in New Zealand racing history. Michael Guerin is racing editor for the New Zealand Herald, and I asked him if it happened, how might race fixing occur?
Well, you would need at least 2 participants to be involved, John. One of those participants would need to not be trying, and one of those participants would need to be the person who was trying to win the race, because the object of fixing a race tends to be to back the winner. The problem is most races have 8, 10 or even 12 up to 15 participants. So unless you have several of those participants able or not trying to win the race, and you know which horse is most likely to gain the advantage and win the race, it's really hard to predict the outcome. So premeditated collusion in horse racing is one of those things people sort of suspect goes on, but these days it's incredibly rare, mainly, John, because of technology, because once these things do happen, A, not only are they easy to watch again on video and try and catch the perpetrators, but B, the technology of the electronic footprint of the people who are doing the gambling. If you bet in New Zealand, the TAB will hand over your betting records or the video surveillance, which is in most TABs, to the police or the Racing Integrity Unit if they suspect a racing incident has been rigged in any way. And because the betting pools on harness racing do not tend to be gigantic, nothing, for example, like would be on an All Black Test match, any large bet would often have a red flag next to it, and for that reason will be easily detected. So race fixing is a very hard thing to not only put together, but a hard thing to make any serious money out of.
It's also a hard thing to prove, right? Certainly in Australia, very compelling evidence of planning, of collusion, of intent has been required. It's not just enough to look at the video and say that guy's not trying.
I would suggest, because looking at these races, it'll be incredibly difficult for a judge to actually say, looking at a race, well, that horse underperformed or that horse didn't try. Yeah. Even for a racing expert, that would be really hard. I would suggest for the police to go ahead with charges. They must at least be confident that some of the telecommunication surveillance they've been involved in, phone tapping and text messaging surveillance, has given them reason to believe they can successfully prosecute these cases. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone ahead with it. I would suggest that's why the Racing Integrity Unit, who polices the racing industry, got the police involved, because the police have the powers to get, court rulings and therefore telecommunications surveillance, which the Racing Integrity Unit doesn't have. So that surveillance, I think, is at the absolute centrepiece of these allegations, these investigations, and the charges which came up this morning. Secondary to that, John, we also have seen 2 racing industry licence holders. Now, licence holders are people who are either trainers, drivers or jockeys, 2 of them charged over the possession of Class B drugs. So the drugs element to the story is not a horse drugging performance enhancing element and therefore involving the betting. This is basically recreational drugs. What's happened here, John, I'm absolutely sure, is that the investigations or the telecommunications surveillance have found out that these people may or allegedly have been using these Class B drugs or supplying them, and that investigation has been almost secondary to the main race-fixing investigation.
Michael, what will it mean for racing in New Zealand if, and clearly this is a hypothetical, there has been race-fixing, will it mean the end of betting on horses?
Well, John, you would think so, but the evidence would suggest not. I know that sounds strange, and I'm not trying to put a golden halo on this. Yes, it is damaging for the racing industry. Yes, we could see people at the top of the racing industry suspended from their licences if they are found guilty. And yes, that would be a major bleeding nose. But overseas last year in Victoria, they had a gigantic scandal, way bigger than this, involving one of the biggest racing stables in Australia. Last weekend, they had their first Group 1 race for the season, and betting was up 16% on the race meeting from last year. No one thinks less of Winx because champion jockeys in Australia have been fined for betting against their own horses, or James McDonald, of course, was fined and suspended from racing for 18 months. Racing has a remarkable ability to survive these things. It is not a good situation. It does threaten the credibility of the industry. But, John, you also ask yourself, to the husband and wife who are popping along to Ellerslie in the middle of December to drink a bottle of champagne and have a few bets, is any of this going to bother them? And the reality is, probably not.
Michael Kieran, who is the racing editor for the New Zealand Herald, very generously joining us on RNZ. A fascinating business. Charges laid, of course, and there's still a long, long way to go. The Australian evidence suggests it is very difficult to prove a case of race fixing. Before 6, much earlier in the program, Tess Brunton filed a story from Wanaka about the high cost of living there. Once again, like Queenstown, this is a tourism town. There are lots of people doing jobs in the tourism industry which tend often to not pay that well. And the cost of living there is going up and up and up. Well, we've had an amazing amount of very detailed feedback from people. Here's a couple of samples. I live in Wanaka. I'm 30 years old and my husband and I flat with 2 others. We can only afford to live here because I get a family discount on rent. We moved here because there is so much opportunity and started our own business, which is doing really well. But we're coming to realise that unless we somehow start to make millions in profit, we will never be able to afford to actually build a life here. It's an incredible place to live, but when can I have children if I can't afford market rent or be able to purchase a house? So we will have to move on for now and try elsewhere. This from another listener. Hello, I've been in Wanaka since 1994. It's a struggle to live here. I'm a single mum working 2 jobs and trying to get a small business off the ground, but rents and wages just don't reflect the cost of living here. Rentals have skyrocketed. We are living in an old batch in Albertown and lucky to pay a reasonable rent. We don't know how long we will have this place and worry that we will never be able to pay the rents if we have to move. I do know that a lot of the so-called affordable housing was bought up by realtors and now rented for huge amounts. Seriously thinking of leaving this beautiful town. Came here for the outdoors, but it's now turning into an elite town only the rich can afford. A little bit like Aspen. And there's more. We'll bring it to you if you have time. Obviously, this reflects the experience of Queenstown. It reflects the experience of the stories we've been telling in Auckland for years. This contagion is spreading. Relatively high rents, very high in tourism towns, and relatively low wages, and people can't make ends meet. We really appreciate hearing from you. Thank you for sharing those stories. Let's go back to Nauru for the 3rd or 4th time tonight. We're back and forth like a yo-yo. Jacinda Ardern has made a flying visit, speaking of back and forth, to Nauru for the Pacific Islands Forum for the Leaders Retreat today. The Prime Minister emerged from the all-day Leaders Retreat to speak with journalists and unveil a plaque at the Nauru campus of the University of South Pacific, where, as we heard earlier on Checkpoint, she was treated to a surprise song by Nauru's president. The jury of you, via your feedback, was fairly mixed on that song. She says it's unlikely she will meet with any refugees while she's in the tiny island nation, although she may run into them in the community, not if the Nauru authorities have anything to do with it, I suspect. Jacinda Ardern says the regional security threat posed by climate change has come through strongly at the Leaders Retreat.
That is a new addition to the Boyd Declaration. It hasn't been present in security declarations before, but there's recognition from the members of this forum that if you're talking about threats to security, climate change presents one of the most significant. Also, a really strong message that no one wants to give up. This is about adaptation. It is about trying to ensure that we preserve culture, place, identity by ensuring that we are adapting but trying to reserve and preserve the ability for people to stay in their homelands, and that remains a focus for the forum as well.
Jacinda Ardern speaking after the Leaders Retreat a short time ago. It's 18 minutes past 6. Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court has had a chaotic start to his Senate confirmation hearing. Democrats complained about Republicans withholding documents about Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who they fear will move the court in a conservative direction for decades to come. Remember, these are appointments for life. Shouting protesters were bustled out of the hearings after interruptions over concerns about Kavanagh's stances on issues from abortion to LGBT rights. The unified show of opposition against the nomination came as Judge Kavanaugh made his first public testimony on Capitol Hill, where lawmakers in the Senate Judiciary Committee are considering him for a seat on the highest and easily the most influential court in America. The Supreme Court really does shape American life. CNN's Jessica Schneider reports.
Within seconds of the start of Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, the discourse devolved into dissent.
We cannot possibly move forward, Mr. Chairman.
I extend a very warm welcome
we have not
to
been
Judge
given
Kavanaugh,
an opportunity to have a meaningful
his wife.
hearing.
We are rushing through this process in a way that is unnecessary.
Democrats taking issue with a document dump overnight of 42,000 pages from Kavanaugh's days in President George W. Bush's White House. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley saying his staff reviewed every page by late Monday night.
The point is that no one could prepare and review 42,000 documents in one evening. We know that, no matter how much coffee you drink.
Another 100,000 pages from the same time period have also been held back. The Trump administration says they are likely protected by constitutional privilege. Democrats, though, say it's suspicious.
Judge Kavanaugh, America needs to see those documents.
We have been denied real access to the documents we need to advise.
Mr. Chairman, regular orders called for.
Which turns this hearing into a charade and a mockery of our norms.
Well,
and Mr. Chairman, I therefore move to adjourn this hearing.
CNN has learned the show of force was orchestrated during a weekend conference call led by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, even though Democrats don't have the votes to block Kavanaugh's nomination alone. Brett Kavanaugh's nomination and the conservative tilt he would likely bring to the Supreme Court has unleashed anger that's spilled into the hearing room.
Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to have this loudmouth removed. I mean, we shouldn't have to put up with this kind of stuff.
But Republicans rallied behind Kavanaugh, calling Democrats sore losers.
I believe this fight is nothing more and nothing less than an attempt by our Democratic colleagues to relitigate the 2016 presidential election.
In a play for bipartisanship, a former law clerk to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke, endorsing Judge Kavanaugh and lamenting how political the judicial nomination process has become.
Judge Kavanaugh is the best choice that liberals could reasonably hope for in these circumstances. I am sure that some members of the Senate knew that they would disagree with Justice Ginsburg's legal views when she was a nominee, but Justice Ginsburg was confirmed 96-3.
Judge Kavanaugh attempted to bat down the claims of pure politics at play, saying he will adhere solely to the rule of law.
I do not decide cases based on personal or policy preferences. I am not a pro-plaintiff or pro-defendant judge. I'm not a pro-prosecution or pro-defense judge. I am a pro-law judge.
And Kavanaugh said working with his fellow justices would be paramount.
Jessica Schneider in Washington. The key point that Jessica made, of course, is the Democrats don't have the numbers to keep Kavanaugh off the Supreme Court. They will need Republicans to switch. As of Monday, a half of Countdown's 181 supermarkets rid stores of single-use plastic bags. The move has received mixed reactions. The supermarket chain announced in November last year they'd stop using the bags by the end of this year, and 2 reusable options would be on offer instead, or you can take your own bags, of course. But the cost and the fact both reusable options are made of plastic has raised eyebrows. Katie Scotcher reports.
Stepping into the Manurewa Countdown, trolley in tow, it was clear the supermarket has banned the bag. Posters with the phrase "Goodbye plastic bags, hello cleaner New Zealand" rest on top of every till, and trolleys full of reusable bags are dotted around the store. Most shoppers were pleased about the supermarket's decision, including Stevie McDonald. She's a keen reusable bag user and says if she forgets them, she just bungs her groceries in the boot or in a washing basket.
I think it's awesome that they've taken it out and making people more aware and pushing it on them, making them more aware and pushing it on them and saying this is what we're now doing, so you help us do it too.
Jemima Jones from Manurewa described the changes as annoying.
They should have put it back to how it was before.
Why do you say that?
Because it's too much buying the reusable ones.
Colleen Tipene says having to pay for the bags should force people into the habit of buying them once and not forgetting them.
That gets people into the habit of bringing their bags, having them on them all the time, or after they get home, unload their shoppings and that, and put their bags back in the car. Because it took me a while to learn that.
Countdown now offers 2 reusable options, a $1 bag which can be used up to 150 times before it starts to break down, and a 15-cent emergency reusable bag which can be used up to 20 times. Both are made of plastic. President of Engineers for Social Responsibility, Thomas Nietzert, says the supermarkets should be congratulated for their decision to ban single-use bags. But he says offering reusable bags made of plastic almost defeats the purpose.
They could find a different material like renewable materials that could be, for example, made of wool or cotton or some other textile or even hemp fibers. Then that would be better, but it is certainly a start. As long as these are not single-use bags, then I think it's a good start, but if they think about it, they can do better.
Countdown's General Manager of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability, Kerry Hannafin, says both bags can be recycled with other soft plastics and don't pose the same environmental threat as a single-use plastic bag.
The problem that we are most trying to solve is getting rid of single-use bags and single-use packaging, actually. Like, that is our drive as a businesses to wherever we can reduce the reliance and need for things that we can use once, and the options that we have are not used once. And what we are finding is that people are not having to buy and buy and buy again.
All Countdown stores are set to be plastic bag free by the end of the year. I tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Katie Scottra ho.
6:25, the government is hoping it can reduce reoffending by criminals on bail by, wait for this, helping them avoid queues when they're on the phone. Corrections has launched a new smartphone app with information on bail conditions, which the head of Corrections Innovation Program says will hopefully stop people on bail sitting in call queues, getting grumpy, hanging up and running away because they don't know what they're meant to do. Here's our political reporter, Joe Moyer.
The Bail Phone app is designed to work on any smartphone, regardless of cost. It provides defendants with direct access to support services, makes it easier to request information, and saves them time sitting on hold on the phone or in a court queue. The head of the High Impact Innovation Program, Lee Marsh, says the prison muster has dropped by 650 since March, and their pilots are a key contributor to that.
The prison population peaked in March at around 10,830 odd. And it was just towards the end of March, early April, that we've started to bear fruit as the programme. We've seen a steady decline in the prison population.
The app was launched 2 weeks ago.
Now, the purpose of the app is it's to promote compliance with bail, make it easier to access the system so they don't have to sit in call queues and get grumpy and hang up and then run away without any vetting or control.
The National Party's corrections spokesman David Bennett says initiatives like the Bail app do have a role, but he warns it's going to take a lot more to put a dent in ballooning prison numbers.
We would expect there will be a continuation and increase in prison numbers next year, and apps like that will be effective in some way, but the rising prison population is a tide that is coming to the minister's door.
Corrections Minister Calvin Davis disagrees and says the High Impact Program is already achieving results, proven by the decrease in the prison population.
I've had a look at the app. I think it's fantastic. It cuts out a lot of sort of old-time nonsense, having to make phone calls and that. So I think it's been really effective, and it's just part of a number of tools that we'll be using to continue to safely reduce the prison population.
Lee Marsh says his staff will work closely with the new Criminal Justice Advisory Group, chaired by the former National MP Chester Burrows. He says their pilots are the first step in what will ultimately be the advisory group's longer-term reforms. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
We're going to end tonight with a rather wonderful story, really, slightly unexpected. 13 years after they were stolen, a pair of ruby slippers worth millions of dollars and featured in the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz, or The Wizard of the Foz, as my son used to call it, have finally been recovered. Colette Luke has more.
14 years after vanishing like the Wicked Witch of the East under a house. A pair of ruby slippers worth millions of dollars, featured in the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz, have finally been recovered. The FBI announced the finding on Tuesday in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota.
Not only were these slippers stolen, but the memories of a lot of Americans were stolen back in 2005. And we hope today that we give those memories back.
The sequin shoes are one of 4 pairs worn by Judy Garland, who played Dorothy in the iconic 1939 musical fantasy film. The slippers were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, in an overnight robbery in August 2005. The FBI joined the investigation in 2017 and said an extortion plot led agents to their recovery the following year, though no one has been arrested or charged in the case. Officials have asked the public for help in identifying the suspects before they strike again.
Our hope today is that folks that are watching this, if you know something about the theft, that you come forward and you share that with us.
People at the Judy Garland Museum celebrated the recovery.
We were in shock this morning. It was awesome news.
And I know I speak for everyone.
Even Grand Rapids Police Chief Scott Johnson expressed his joy over the news.
You know, they're more than just a pair of shoes, the slippers. They're an enduring symbol of the power of belief.
Because for these ruby red slippers, there's no place like home.
Lovely. That ends Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you all for your company and your feedback. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, it's been a pleasure being with you. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The private investigator who helped Terry Friesen get her manslaughter conviction overturned says her case highlights the need for a Criminal Cases Review Commission. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she would have liked to have talked with refugees while in Nauru, but a formal meeting would have to be facilitated by the Nauru government. And 10 people have now been charged as a result of the police investigation into corruption in harness racing. Our next news and weather is at 7.
In Eyewitness, the strap, the cane, 6 of the best. Never did anyone any harm, did it?
We would get our asses paddled if we acted like morons. So we didn't act like morons.
Teachers could use reasonable force.
People would probably prefer to get a smack in their bottom than do detention.
But what was reasonable?
I remember one time not spelling something properly and getting kicked in the back, like really hard in the base of my spine.
Was there ever a time when corporal punishment helped you in your learning?